Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Master Series. It's episode 55. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson-Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Moonshots family. Good morning, Moonshots members and subscribers, and our listeners, our viewers, our social followers, the whole shebang. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on episode 55 of the Master Series. Mike, 55 sounds like a lot. I'm sure we say it every time, and I'm sure the subscribers, can't believe that we don't remember what number we're up to. 55. It does seem like a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, it's almost like we're lost in all this information and we can't seem to make a decision about what episode we're recording.
You know what? That's a perfect segue, Mike, because funnily enough, the topic that we're going to be diving into today and exploring out loud with each other is, in fact, something that can help us when it comes to choosing the right numbers. And that is decision making. This is a bit of a skill, Mike, that I think does get better with age, so to speak. I think you can struggle with making decisions. We all can. And it doesn't take much for me to feel overwhelmed when it comes to having too many things on the plate and trying to figure out what that priority is and where do I start with ticking these things off my multiple to-do lists. And sometimes delaying a decision to be made is quite painful, in the sense that you can kick that can far too long down the street, can't you? And it becomes even bigger. It's like the snowball that becomes too big to manage.
Oh, Mark, I think you've kind of painted a very polite way of saying that we're all stressed the F out and we've got too many things going on and we see too many possibilities and we can't make a decision. We're kind of paralyzed. We feel that there's a million different things. You don't know what to do next because there's just too many. And this show is for all of us that have this experience and would love to have a little bit of clarity, a little bit of calm. And that's what we're hoping to do, Mark, because we look at people like Elon Musk, we look at people like Warren Buffett. The real trick is they have mental models that they apply to life and succeed as a result. And the greatest discovery we've made on the show is that those mental models are available to us all. So you've gone and put together a collection of some of the best thinking about thinking and decision making so we can unleash this kind of mental model approach to life.
Yeah, and look, I think our longest running subscribers will be familiar with our enthusiasm for mental models. They really are a bit like a cheat code for life, and they're super handy when it comes to decision making and various other life moments that feel a little bit challenging or overwhelming. So it's really fun, Mike, for us to be able to get back into this particular one, particularly one that is so relevant to all of us. We make decisions every single day. So with that in mind, I thought, Mike, we could set the scene. We could get our minds into the headspace of the challenges of decision making and the challenges of critical thinking. And I thought a great clip to get us started would be TEDx, who are going to help us set the scene and introduce us to the concept of trying to figure out critical thinking and finding the most useful information in a world of confusion.
A sea of decisions stretches before us. Some are small and unimportant, but others have a larger impact on our lives. For example, which politician should I vote for? Should I try the latest diet craze? Or will email make me a millionaire? We're bombarded with so many decisions that it's impossible to make a perfect choice every time. But there are many ways to improve our chances, and one particularly effective technique is critical thinking. This is a way of approaching a question that allows us to carefully deconstruct a situation, reveal its hidden issues, such as bias and manipulation, and make the best decision. If the critical part sounds negative, that's because, in a way, it is. Rather than choosing an answer because it feels right, a person who uses critical thinking subjects all available options to scrutiny and skepticism. Using the tools at their disposal, they'll eliminate everything but the most useful and reliable information. There are many different ways of approaching critical thinking, but here's one 5-step process that may help you solve any number of problems. 1. Formulate your question. In other words, know what you're looking for. This isn't always as straightforward as it sounds. For example, if you're deciding whether to try out the newest diet craze, your reasons for doing so may be obscured by other factors, like claims that you'll see results in just 2 weeks. But if you approach the situation with a clear view of what you're actually trying to accomplish by dieting, whether that's weight loss, better nutrition, or having more energy, that'll equip you to sift through this information critically, find what you're looking for, and decide whether the new fad really suits your needs. 2. Gather your information. There's lots of it out there, so having a clear idea of your question will help you determine what's relevant. If you're trying to decide on a diet to improve your nutrition, you may ask an expert for their advice or seek other people's testimonies. Information gathering helps you weigh different options, moving you closer to a decision that meets your goal. 3. Apply the information, something you do by asking critical questions. Facing a decision, ask yourself, what concepts are at work? What assumptions exist? Is my interpretation of the information logically sound? For example, in an email that promises you millions, you should consider, what is shaping my approach to this situation? Do I assume the sender is telling the truth? Based on the evidence, is it logical to assume I'll win any money? 4. Consider the implications. Imagine it's election time, and you've selected a political candidate based on their promise to make it cheaper for drivers to fill up on gas. At first glance, that seems great. But what about the long-term environmental effects? If gasoline use is less restricted by cost, this could also cause a huge surge in air pollution, an unintended consequence that's important to think about. 5. Explore other points of view. Ask yourself why so many people are drawn to the policies of the opposing political candidate. Even if you disagree with everything that candidate says, exploring the full spectrum of viewpoints might explain why some policies that don't seem valid to you appeal to others. This will allow you to explore alternatives, evaluate your own choices, and ultimately help you make more informed decisions. This 5-step process is just one tool, and it certainly won't eradicate difficult decisions from our lives, but it can help us increase the number of positive choices we make. Critical thinking can give us the tools to sift through a sea of information and find what we're looking for. And if enough of us use it, it has the power to make the world a more reasonable place.
I really like this, Mark, and I love the 5 steps. But I have to bring us back to the first thing that they mentioned in that video, which is that we have biases. We are so unaware. I mean, that's the whole thing about having a bias, is we have these without knowing that in really kind of color how we think about a decision. And to me, it is almost the most meta thing you can do. If you want to make better decisions and have less anxiety, less stress about, like, do I go left or right, is to know that we have certain biases. And what comes to my mind is I know I make bad decisions in the heat of the moment. If I am emotional or frustrated, I can be very tempted to make a quick, decisive go, left, without giving it due consideration. So one of the things I know, the more important the decision, the more time I need to allocate. So preferably, I like the opportunity to have a weekend to think about something big. And that's in part not only conscious thinking, but subconscious, like just letting it sit with me. Because it's amazing how sometimes your subconscious can go, actually, no, you really do want to go right.
Yeah.
And when somebody is forcing me to make a decision and I physically feel a level of discomfort, this is a trigger for me to go, okay, I'm not in a position to make a good position here because I'm not liking this imposition of making a decision. So I need a timeout to buy myself some time. This is like the awareness around my biases. When you think about critical decision making and what we just discovered in that clip, is there a bias that you know you have about critical thinking and decision making? Is there something you've become aware of that you try and sort of counter?
Yeah, the thing for me nowadays is a real focus on prioritization.
Oh,
So I have the tendency to jump on the next thing that comes onto my plate. So it comes from, I suppose, a bit of a lack of maybe focus or the ability to jump on a fire as soon as it appears. So you take the problem at the kind of face value without really analyzing, is this a thing that matters the most right now? Or is
oh,
it to be something that is going to help maybe a colleague or a friend or a boss that's asking me to go out and do a particular task and do it ASAP? There's always time pressure. But instead of jumping on that thing and deprioritizing something else that maybe is more important, the work I'm trying to do nowadays is to evaluate what the context is for each of those requests, each of those
right.
problems. A little bit like you, where you say you want to give yourself a weekend or give yourself time. Mine is trying to look at everything and realize, okay, well, if I create enough space to accomplish task A, that's actually going to give me more time down the line to then work on task C. And
Mm,
then I'll be able to focus on task B and so on and so forth. So the model that I try and think of when I'm applying critical thinking and focusing on making a decision is, am I making the right decision at the right time? Is this something that I need to do right now?
yeah.
Or am I reacting to a situation that somebody's thrown at me, perhaps over the fence with no context, that then I'm jumping on straight away and deprioritizing something more relevant?
Yeah. Um, that's so funny. Like as you were talking, I could visualize the Eisenhower matrix, which is like
Yeah.
what's important, what's urgent. So
Mm.
you're saying that you have a tendency to maybe you make kind of put everything in the urgent bucket and not
Yeah.
like, hang on
It-
a sec, is this urgent or is it important and can be done in a few
mm.
days, but it's just important to do? Do you find like you have a habit of like everything's urgent?
Yeah, everything's urgent.
Okay.
Everything that comes onto my play mic feels urgent. Maybe that's the key thing here. It feels to me like it's the most important thing that I need to do. But when I react like that, what I think happens is the work that I'm then doing is sometimes rushed. So
Oh,
instead of trying to think that everything is a fire that needs to be put out straight away, give yourself a little moment to really analyze what is going on. What is the context? Is it the priority? And then create that space to formulate a good response or pull more questions out of the hat and ask them back or whatever it might be. That's one of those key things that certainly I've noticed has always been a problem in work as well as life, I
yeah.
suppose. Trying to balance too many things, right?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a confession show, Mark, but I've
Yeah.
got another one. I tend to be very much on wishful thinking.
Oh.
So someone can be proposing an idea, and um, I'm like, yeah, that's possible.
Mm.
Like I have this natural inclination to, yeah, that sounds great. Let's go build it. And I've
Hmm.
had to really know this bias that I have to wishful thinking
Hmm.
and pull myself back and be way more critical, particularly with ventures that I'm involved in, because you can then get involved in stuff and commit to stuff with other people, only to find yourself going, oh my gosh, I didn't check anything here. I've just jumped in. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Mike, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And then would you say that that's, to quote a bit of Shane Parrish, that opportunity cost, saying yes to everything when actually when you say yes to everything or say yes to an opportunity, you have to balance what you're saying no to at the same time?
What I find it is that just because it sounds exciting doesn't mean it's going to be exciting. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Not everything is the most exciting thing that you're going to work
Yeah,
on.
so I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go do it. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, if I'd only just thought about this for half a second.
Yeah. Which I guess is second order thinking, as I'm
Yeah,
sure you're,
think
as a,
about opportunity cost, a
yeah.
second order of thinking, consequences.
Yeah.
Um, so we're going to get a lot more into the different models, but it just shows us that like we really have to be aware that we have, as human beings, the capacity to make terrible decisions. And if you know that as a truth and don't have an ego and to say, look, I can really make some stinkers, then I think that's the first part to making better decisions, that self-awareness. But I'll propose to you, Mark, there's one thing I can guarantee you is not a bad decision. What do you think
And
that is?
I think I know exactly what that good decision is, and that is to become a member of the Moonshots podcast, in which you get access to what you're listening to now. Now, obviously, all of our members, this is one of those episodes that exactly for you guys. So, as usual, we bring out the fanfare and we roll out the red carpet for all of you guys. Bob, Dietmar, Marjan, Mr. Bonjour, Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Samuela, Lasse, Steve, and Craig. Ravi, Ola, Ingram, and Roger, Steph, Raw, Gayla, and Mike, Zachary, Austin, Ola, Andy, Jasper, Fabian, Guhong, and Marco Ken, Ryan, Natalie, Malcolm and Emily, Jamie, Edwin, Bill and Maria, B. Mararu, RG, Peter, Paul, MH, Gary, Cloudcover, Julia, Mark and Richard. We got some new faces in there, Mike. We have some familiar ones who have been there for a long time. Guys, everybody is sharing the Moonshot spaceship. Thank you so much for joining the crew. We are out in space learning out loud, and it couldn't be better doing all of that with you guys. Thank you so much for your support and for keeping our lights on.
I totally agree. I second this idea, Mark. We really do appreciate that very wise decision from all of our members. So, Mark, now that we're kind of painting this picture of like, oh, we can actually make bad decisions, one of our favorite shows that we've done recently was with Roth DeBelly. And I think he brought some great thinking on how we can actually improve our lens around making decisions, don't you?
I love that, Mike. You're right. Let's get into DeBelly. We covered his book, The Art of Thinking Clearly, which is perfect for this episode. So let's hear what he has to say with regards to, Mike, something that's very relevant for all of us, the paradox of choice.
If you have too many options, you get distracted. And sometimes you have to learn how to close doors, how to close options. We have a tendency to leave all the options open. In a relationship, we'll have this option open, and then, I'm married, but I'm also going to have, a little affair here and there, or I have a job, but then I have some side jobs, I'm doing side careers, or I study something, but I'm also studying 3 other things on the side because it gives me options. This notion of having as many options available to you as possible is not a good one because it distracts you. It's better to close some of the doors. I'm not saying all doors except one, but close some doors because doors distract you. You can't focus a lot of energy onto your main door, into your main room then. So closing doors is important. The other one is the paradox of choice. The more choice we have, the harder it is for us to make a decision. If you go to your supermarket, you have an abundance of, let's say, yogurts. You have 300 different choices of yogurt, and you will never be happy because you will never be sure whether the yogurt you pick, that specific brand you pick, was the perfect one. So it makes you happier if you have maybe 3 or 6 types of yogurt left, only 3 or 6 types of yogurt on the shelf. That makes you much happier than picking out of 300. So limiting choice has a certain way of making you happier.
Even though I'm not currently living in America, keep one thing about this choice idea. America is built currently on the idea of waking up on a Saturday morning and going to Walmart, where you are faced with more choices of assorted plastic formations than you will ever know what to do with. But that's what people love. People love the idea of walking into these mega warehouses with choices for just everything, that it never ends. And I think if the typical Walmart was 6 times the size of the current one, they'd love that even more.
Yeah, I think so too. It almost has something like entertainment to me. It's almost like a video game. You walk into a major mega store of a Walmart, you go around. It's more of a game, more of a huge. It's almost like watching a movie. You walk through the aisles. It's like, watching a movie. It doesn't really add to your life, to the quality of your life. It just distracts.
But the people there think just the opposite of what you said.
Yeah, they do. But science is clear on it. You're much happier when you have a limited choice after having made a choice than when you have a huge sample of things to pick from.
Mark, the interesting thing that I take from this clip is we think having all that optionality is fantastic. So we're trained in retail, especially with all those choices. But isn't it funny, like how popular someone like Marie Kondo, who we did a show on, how popular she is, and her thinking is, if it doesn't bring you joy, it goes out of the wardrobe. Like even this simple practice is where we see this overwhelm coming back time and time again. When you think about your life, Mark, and how do you start to make this move to avoid the paradox of choice? What are some of the things you're doing professionally and personally to like filter down the options a little bit?
I think this idea of limiting the options, as we heard in that clip, is very much something I try and do somewhat actively. So what that might mean is limiting the sort of social excursions that might come my way, because I know that will perhaps not get in the way of making a decision, but it might impact my ability to make decisions later on. So what I mean is having a bit of time off, prioritizing rest, recovery, instead of going out and maybe seeing friends or doing something social. So there's that element, trying to say no, become better at saying no to certain opportunities and realizing what opportunities are the ones to really say yes to.
Yes.
Which I think speaks to that idea of the limiting choice. Now, you're right, though, that YOLO effect, I only live once, I don't want to, or FOMO as well, the fear of missing out, that comes in quite a lot when it's a choice about being social or going out and doing something. So that certainly gets a little bit tricky.
Yeah, I agree. Like, where I tend to find myself being overwhelmed is when I'm entertaining, like to use your example, where I'm entertaining what other people want.
Yeah.
So it's the classic thing. If you pay too much attention to your email inbox, you're effectively working to everybody else's agenda and not your own. That's why I try to avoid email. Like I'll do a quick scan in the morning. Anything urgent gets immediately dealt with. Otherwise, it all gets snoozed, and I move it away so I can go deep and know I've answered any urgent things. And then I've got my time to work on my priorities to deliver the value that I need to do. That's for me how I kind of try and reduce the choices. The same thing is take social media off your phone homepage. So I don't delete it completely from my phone, but I actually take it off the homepage. So I would show you, but I'm used to using my phone as a camera here. Half of my homepage is empty.
Great. Less is more.
Yep. No social media on the homepage.
Yeah.
I just don't even want to be tempted.
Yeah. And it's so addictive, right? I find that the ones I go back to all the time are classics: email, instant messaging, and so on. And you're right, if you bury it a little bit, or what I've started doing, adding screen time restrictions each day.
Oh, wow.
So, 10, 15 minutes, which then reminds you and calls you out when you get close to that target.
Yes.
Or sorry, that limit.
Okay, I got a power tip for you on decision making.
Yeah.
Because we're getting into social media and attention and paradox of choice. You know how our enemy of our attention is the feed, right?
Oh,
the infinite scroll, So what I've tried to do is manage my watch later in YouTube. I tried to manage that so I have one 20 to 30 minute show that is not work related, that is at the top of my watch later, as if I get the chance to watch something in the evening, that will be the show rather than me watching 5 random clips. So I actually get into planning my YouTube time in order to avoid just scrolling and refreshing and all of that sort of stuff, you know?
Strategizing and what
Yeah.
you're gonna look at. I've got such a long watch list on IMDb, on Todoist, and as soon as you load up Netflix, it's the last thing I can figure out. Yeah. And you're right. What a waste of time.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But I mean, what we're really doing now, Mark, is with critical thinking and making people aware of there is a process. You've got these biases. You need to employ this process in order to avoid all the classic human mistakes. Because we have to remember that where never before have we had so many choices, so much stuff fighting for our attention.
Yeah.
And we're obviously going to cast our mind in a moment towards all the different little tactics and playbooks you can play out against different problems and different solutions. But I cannot stress enough that if you know that things are fighting for your attention, which affects your ability to make a decision, to know that you're a human, so therefore you're not really going to make very good decisions, knowing this is such powerful insight. Because if you look at me, I would rush to wishful thinking, jump into something and just go, 2 months later, what have I done? You know, this is available to us. Or in your part, if you're aware that you have this tendency, everything's urgent, you can enforce even just taking time and space for review and come back. Okay, is this truly urgent? No, it's important. As long as I plan it for 2 days from now, it'll be done on time. Good.
Yeah. That's it, Mike. That's the secret, isn't it? The secret power that mental models can do for us. They are the thing that we can lean on to help us prioritize, to help us see those blind spots and the risks.
Yeah. It's almost like we've got to slow down a little bit and take a breath before making the decision.
Yeah, that seems, personally for me, the hardest thing is making enough time and space to then make that informed decision. Obviously, one of the challenges there is the more time you have, the more time you're going to take to make the decision. Sometimes a deadline is what I'm missing. And that will help me make that decision, is that requirement to then, choose and then carry on with things. So, having a little bit of space is good. Sometimes having a bit of a deadline, at least on paper, in your own head is even better.
I totally agree. So we've now kind of set it up. We're about to take a turn, Mark, because we're taking a breath. We know that we can make bad decisions. We're reducing the things fighting for our attention. But you've got an absolute cracker coming up here.
Look, I think, Mike, we knew that Shane Parrish was going to come up in any show that was based around decision-making and mental models. So we've got a clip here from his book, Clear Thinking, that I think really articulates and visualizes a problem that I certainly experience in my life. And I thought it might be fun to hear how it influences yours and presumably those of our members. And that is this concept that life is a little bit like Tetris. We're not going to go down into the history of that game, Mike. Instead, we're going to hear Productivity Game tell us what Shane Parrish has to say about it.
Life is like a game of Tetris. As the blocks accumulate in Tetris, problems accumulate in our lives. When problems stack up, we're just a few bad decisions away from something horrible happening. A job loss, a business failure, a significant loss of money, or the end of an important relationship. But clear thinking can eradicate many blocks, making it easier to make decisions and keep our problem stack low. Shane Parrish's book offers several clear thinking principles that I've come to see as cheat codes in the game of life. Clear thinking cheat code number 1. See problem blocks far in advance. Most of life's problems result from 4 decision defaults: inertia, social, emotional, and ego. The inertia default takes over when we tend to keep doing what we've been doing. It's why we might stay in a job too long and become miserable. The social default takes over when we tend to do what others expect us to do. We may consume too much alcohol because we're around people who are frequently drinking alcohol. We can turn down a drink once or twice, but eventually we give in. The emotional default takes over when we tend to do what we have the impulse to do. We might send an angry email because we're pissed off, without fully considering the damage it could do. The ego default takes over when we tend to seek status and be overconfident in our decisions. We may pursue a high-paying management position, but hate the work. Or we might be so confident in a business idea that we don't bother to do market research. When sales don't meet our expectations, we don't admit we're wrong and keep pouring money into a bad investment. Being aware of these potentially problematic default decisions is like being able to see potentially problematic blocks in Tetris, the L, the backward L, the Z, and the S, coming far in advance. Having time to prepare for these difficult blocks allows us to devise a strategy to prevent these blocks from accumulating in Tetris. In the same vein, taking time to simulate how we're going to handle each of the ISEE default decisions and creating rules to form a new default decision will reduce the likelihood of big problems accumulating in our lives. Take a minute to imagine inertia-based decisions causing your career or business to become stagnant. Now, what can you do to prevent that from happening? One possible rule could be, I spend 2 hours every Friday morning learning and refining professional skills. Or, I take off 1 week a year to explore new business opportunities. Next, imagine the social default dictates your life and causes you to get to the end of your life wishing you'd lived true to yourself instead of merely doing what people expected of you. How are you going to prevent that from happening? Maybe you implement a hell yeah or no rule. If you're not absolutely thrilled to do something, you politely say no. Next, imagine you live purely by emotion and succumb to your animal instincts. You frequently get angry, fearful, and indulge, causing your relationships, investments, and health to fall apart. How are you going to prevent that from happening? Some new rules you could follow would be, I silently count to 5 before responding while angry. Or I never keep junk food in the house. And lastly, imagine your ego causes you to ignore warning signs, leading to significant investment losses or the end of an important relationship. How can you prevent this from happening? Maybe you create a rule in which you always ask, how might I be wrong, before every major decision, and steel man the arguments of people who disagree with you. That is, create the best possible version of opposing opinions.
Mark, how might I be wrong? If I had used that technique with my wishful thinking, I would have saved myself so much suffering.
Right? I know. I wrote that one down too. How can I be wrong? How might I be wrong? I mean, it's the equivalent of having a kind of colleague or partner with you. You know, I believe that there's so much value in collaborating with somebody else because you can level up your idea by instantly finding those friction points. You know, that's such a powerful little way of tricking your own mind into thinking you've got that sounding board, right? How might I be wrong? What are the things that I'm incorrect about? Those biases that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, and I love the hell yeah versus hell nah.
Yeah. If you're not sure, say no.
Yeah, and because you might be like, it could be okay. Like, why spend life doing okay?
Why not?
When you said yes to okay, you actually said no to great.
Yeah. That's it. What have you said no to? That opportunity cost. Mike, look, when I hear those 4 defaults, the emotional one and the ego elements stand out to me as things that I kind of relate to. I think inertia is probably pretty common as well. You know, it's very much easier to not upset the apple cart and keep things going on an even keel, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then what generally happens is people get a little bit miserable down the line. You know, I think it's really valuable to be aware of the things that you are enjoying with work, enjoying with your life, figure out where those friction points are. Like you say, with social media being such a distraction, for example, that's not a particularly good habit to fall back on when you're feeling a little bit depressed or distracted and you're not comfortable with a certain situation in life. But Mike, the thing that I know that we've spoken about a few times on the podcast, and I certainly rely on it pretty much day to day, is to do my best at predetermining or predeciding certain behaviors or certain things that I have in my schedule that I have to do, to help me stick to them and not allow things to slip. So that might be workouts. I know for you, it might be stretches.
Yes.
For me, it'll be studying and so on and so forth. There'll be a few kind of deep work blocks that I'll put into my diary. And, our members won't be necessarily surprised at the idea of calendar blocking. But when it comes to decision making, I find it really, really helpful because it forces space in my brain to think about it.
Yeah. And this is like the wait 5 seconds before responding. It's a bit like me knowing don't make a decision in the heat of the moment. It's like Napoleon said, I want bad news fast and good news slow.
Oh, I like that.
The other thing he did is he let any request that came to him, particularly if it didn't have an urgency thing, he just let it sit for a while, and then he would comment that they solved themselves and he didn't need to make any decision.
You know what? Delegation. I love that.
Totally. So I think like a couple of I've got a little list here of when to apply different models, and I thought we could have a bit of fun with this, and I can give you the model, and we can sort of figure out what it's best suited for. So we've celebrated a lot Elon Musk and first principles thinking. I would propose from this list, when we think about first principles, when do you apply this model? And by the way, if you're really interested in this, go to moonshots.io, type in first principles, or hit up the Elon or any of the other shows where we go deeper into this model. But first principles thinking is great if you're stuck on something, like you're so in the immediate issues that you can't look over the top.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to build, and this is what Elon does, if you're going to build something from scratch, he believed that electric cars were inevitable because of the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And he held on to that and made big bets, courageous bets throughout his career based on that. And he could do that through using first principles. So when you hear about first principles, like when would you use first principles, Maya? When do you think, oh, that would be a good first principles mental model kind of assignment?
Particularly when I have a task or a set of tasks that feel a little bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's too many plates and maybe my brain is like a squiggle on a piece of paper. I think when first principles thinking really has a value to me is bringing clarity. So being able to take a step back and say, okay, well, let's just simplify all of this. You come into a situation and there's 1,000,001 different things to do. Where do you start?
Yes.
Do you start at the thing that's closest, or do you start with the thing that carries the most weight? And
so that's really interesting, Mark, because you're getting clarity and like seeing through the fog, right?
Yeah.
Very practical. My first reaction on first principles is if you said to me, okay, Mike, you live in Sydney, you've got the opportunity to move to New York, I would instantly do kind of a combination, right? I would do first principles because I kind of have this thing. If it's a big decision, you have to use first principles truths. Like, does this work for my family long term? Are there future long term, like, how does this set us up for the health of the family? Yeah. And if I use that as a first principle and I said, look, health of the family is the number one thing, and no, it's better to be in Sydney for that, then that gives me instantly that lens. What's interesting is you can use second order thinking, which is another one on the list here, where you say, okay, so let's say we did it. What would be all the knock-on effects? And the first thing I would say is visas, green cards, tax. Do we want to even move again? Like that is the consequence of the decision. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh boy, that's a lot of different things happening just for this one decision. I don't know if now that I think about how big the list of second order effects, all those things would happen next. Oh, what do we do with our house in Australia? What do we do with family in Australia? And then you'd be like, oh, hang on, this feels like too much. Or maybe like, you know what, this feels great. Here's another one, Mark. This is called inversion thinking, and that's used traditionally when something feels really risky. And this would be perfect for someone like me because I have the habit of wishful thinking. Inversion is like, don't hope for the best, hope for the worst.
Oh, I'm not sure I like that one.
And what it really gets you to do is like, okay, so what happens if everything goes totally wrong with this?
Yeah. So
Now,
in that situation, would you
Yes.
imagine that worst case scenario and then kind of plan for it so that you are armed and you've strategized?
Well, absolutely. So you're spot on. You're prepared if things don't quite work out. But here's another example of that coming to life. A lot of financial investors and advisors will tell you only invest in the stock market what you're prepared to lose.
Mm. Yeah.
And that helps you distance yourself like, okay, I've just bet on that stock. I'll give it a year and I'm not going to even look at it. I'm not going to change.
Mm.
If you're like so nervous, oh, I might need that money to cover rent, then you should never have invested in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what inversion does. Like if you've imagined it, it's great. You've invested in the stock, but what happens if you lose your job and you can't pay rent? You're going to have to go get that money, and then you have a taxable event. Then you might be actually pulling it back for less than you invested due to timing. Oh, maybe I shouldn't invest at all then. Bingo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's thinking about that actuality, isn't it? So rather than jumping straight in. Yep. So valuable.
There's another one as well. Like if you're busy actually executing the plan and you want to know like, do I keep going or do I stop? Or like, when is enough enough? There's this idea of feedback loops where you go, test, what did we learn? Test again, what did we learn? So if you're like trying to avoid being in this long-term direction where you're like, oh, this is never going to work out, you can set up a test and learn, or what we call the feedback loop. That's the model where you're like, okay, I'm going to put it into little component parts. Every 2 weeks, I pause. What have I learned? Test again, maybe change something, and create a little bit of a variety, and then go again. Now, did that make the result better? Did I make more progress? And those feedback loops help you avoid like a years long process, and you break it down into weeks. And test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. And here's the cool thing, Mark. I don't think we've touched on like 1% of the mental models that are available to us.
Look, Shane Parrish is a mental model guru. And I know, Mike, you've got the coffee table book, and it's often something that, we've spoken about in the past. There's so many excellent models, aren't there, that we can use in so many different facets of our life. You haven't even mentioned stuff like probability, margin of safety, and so on. There's all those different elements that we can pull in. What I do like, though, when it comes to decision making is that feedback loop. Sometimes we are able to lean back on some of the decisions we've made in the past and the ability to review and learn from what we've done and maybe what didn't work, as well as things that did work. That I think is so valuable when it comes to decision making, because then none of us want to repeat the same mistakes twice, do we?
Totally agree. And I think there's never been a time where mental models are that accessible and that applicable, because you can take a problem right now and say to ChatGPT, okay, here's my problem, apply first principles thinking and give me back some questions to help understand this better. Yeah. That's available to all of us right now.
It's right here, isn't it? I feel as though we are almost a little bit spoiled nowadays when it comes to education, when it comes to being able to put ourselves into positions where we can simulate our responses to these different models, for example.
And that's one of the key ways I use AI and large language models is I can like prod the future and prod the options and give me pros and cons, give me the SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
I don't take it all as gospel, but what I certainly do is go, I didn't think about it like that. Actually, that's kind of right. Now I think about it.
It's that collaboration.
Glad I asked this question now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like you said earlier, how might I be wrong? That's the role perhaps that AI or any type of agent, whether it's your friend or colleague, can provide. You know, hey, this is my bias. This is the thing that I currently propose. How could I be wrong? Well, maybe I am completely wrong, in which case let's start again. You know, it's a really valuable little process. And again, I suppose feedback loop in that space as well is really good, because then you can use AI, for example, to help you figure out the improvements along the way as well.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
So we've got one goodie left, and this time we're going to put things into a bigger perspective, Mark. What have you got to bring home this whole critical thinking, decision-making festival?
Look, I think going down a decision-making theme and not discuss Adam Grant would be a little bit incorrect. And in fact, Mike, it would be the wrong decision. We are going to end on Adam Grant. He's going to help us understand once again that power of procrastination and how sometimes, Mike, procrastinating when you need to make a decision is actually the most effective and efficient thing you can do. Because, Mike, that's going to leave you enough time to think and grow.
Oh, you are all intimately familiar with the mind of a procrastinator. Well, I have a confession for you. I'm the opposite. I'm a precrastinator. Yes, that's an actual term. You know that panic you feel a few hours before a big deadline when you haven't done anything yet? I just feel that a few months ahead of time. But this served me well in college because I finished my senior thesis 4 months before the deadline. And I was proud of that. Until a few years ago, I had a student named Jihei who came to me and said, I have my most creative ideas when I'm procrastinating. And I was like, that's cute. Where are the 4 papers you owe me? No, she was one of our most creative students. And as an organizational psychologist, this is the kind of idea that I test. So I challenged her to get some data. She goes into a bunch of companies. She has people to fill out surveys about how often they procrastinate. And she gets their bosses to rate how creative and innovative they are. And sure enough, the precrastinators like me who rush in and do everything early are rated as less creative than people who procrastinate moderately. So I want to know what happens to the chronic procrastinators. She's like, I don't know, they didn't fill out my survey. No, here are our results. You actually do see that the people who wait till the last minute are so busy goofing off that they don't have any new ideas. And on the flip side, the people who race in are in such a frenzy of anxiety that they don't have original thoughts either. There's a sweet spot where originals seem to live. Why is this? Maybe original people just have bad work habits. Maybe procrastinating does not cause creativity. To find out, we designed some experiments. We asked people to generate new business ideas. And then we get independent raters to evaluate how creative and useful they are. And some of them are asked to do the task right away. Others we randomly assign to procrastinate by dangling Minesweeper in front of them for either 5 or 10 minutes. And sure enough, the moderate procrastinators are 16% more creative than the other 2 groups. Now, Minesweeper is awesome, but it's not the driver of the effect. Because if you play the game first, before you learn about the task, there's no creativity boost. It's only when you're told that you're going to be working on this problem, and then you start procrastinating, but the task is still active in the back of your mind, that you start to incubate. Procrastination gives you time to consider divergent ideas, to think in nonlinear ways, to make unexpected leaps. So just as we were finishing these experiments, I was starting to write a book about originals. And I thought, this is the perfect time to teach myself to procrastinate while writing a chapter on procrastination. So I meta-procrastinated. And like any self-respecting precrastinator, I woke up early the next morning and I made a to-do list with steps on how to procrastinate. And then I worked diligently toward my goal of not making progress toward my goal. I started writing the procrastination chapter, and one day I was halfway through. I literally put it away in mid-sentence for months. It was agony. But when I came back to it, I had all sorts of new ideas. As Aaron Sorkin put it, you call it procrastinating, I call it thinking. And along the way, I discovered that a lot of great originals in history were procrastinators. Take Leonardo da Vinci. He toiled on and off for 16 years on the Mona Lisa. He felt like a failure. He wrote as much in his journal. But some of the diversions he took in optics transformed the way that he modeled light and made him into a much better painter. What about Martin Luther King Jr.? The night before the biggest speech of his life, the March on Washington, he was up past 3 a.m. rewriting it. He's sitting in the audience waiting for his turn to go on stage, and he is still scribbling notes and crossing out lines. When he gets on stage, 11 minutes in, he leaves his prepared remarks to utter 4 words that changed the course of history. I have a dream. That was not in the script. By delaying the task of finalizing the speech until the very last minute, he left himself open to the widest range of possible ideas. And because the text wasn't set in stone, he had freedom to improvise. Procrastinating is a vice when it comes to productivity, but it can be a virtue for
creativity, Mark. I'm totally feeling where Adam Grant's coming from. And I do want to caution our members. We're not saying it will just magically happen 2 minutes before we work on stage. I think what we are saying, though, is you need this time to let an idea or a decision ferment, to grow, to sit with you. You know, mindfulness experts would say you need to let your subconscious go to work on that and give time and space for something to percolate up. I think this is really in line with that advice we're always giving. Write the table of contents a couple of weeks before, and then it gives you time just to time and space. I know for sure, Mark, if you said to me, produce something amazing for tomorrow, and I met the deadline, if you had given me 3 more days, it would be so much better. Because how many times do you do something on one day, and if you have the chance to review it, the worst is when you review it when it's already been sent, but then you review it the next day and go, actually, I could make this better, right?
Yeah. And it's a very frustrating position to be in, where you have to deliver work and you don't feel like you've had enough runway, and that you feel as though there are still questions that are unanswered. You know, maybe that's because you procrastinated, or maybe it's because the deadline was too short. Sometimes it's nice to have, in my experience, that space to let an idea sort of sit for a while. I like this concept of getting given a brief and then having that time to play. You know, really doing something that's completely different. It's like when you're a student and you get told to read the entire exam paper front to back before even picking up a pencil.
I know.
And your brain, that subconscious element, can review and start percolating in the background.
Yes.
That's the power of your brain.
Yes.
And what I like about Adam Grant's invitation or reminder here is that to have that space isn't something to feel guilty about. Instead, it's actually such a valuable tool.
Great point.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because we kind of can be a bit addicted to the dopamine, like tick it off, send it, rather than, you know what, I can send it tomorrow. I can review it in the morning when I'm fresh, right? That's great decision right there and then.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, we've covered some ground in critical thinking and decision making. You've brought some meaty clips. What is the fresh homework assignment for you?
Well, I thought it was going to be Tetris. I thought, you know, a bit of Shane Parrish and the idea of visualizing life into Tetris was going to be my winner. Actually, Mike, I really like this idea of procrastination. I think having that little bit more space to give the idea time to settle is probably worth it versus the benefit of ticking it off the list and saying, email sent, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Because that rushed decision perhaps, or rushed communication form, might actually not be the most, they might not be communicating the thing that I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah.
You know, if you send it out straight away without giving yourself time to sleep on it even,
Yes.
one night, I think you risk the quality going down quite a lot. And that's probably something that I could try and focus on a little bit more, given that I have the tendency to jump on things as soon as they happen and then try and tick it off, knock it out of the park before going on to the second thing.
Yes.
That was my long-winded way, Mike, of saying procrastinating my way to making a decision. What would you say, based on today's episode, you are going to lean more into?
I think I need to do more of the Tetris stuff that we were talking about with Shane Parrish, like hell yeah, hell no, count to 5. I found that exercise, I was like, ooh, am I doing, I felt maybe a little guilty almost. I'm like, do I do that stuff enough? I'm not sure that I do, actually.
Yeah. No, I don't think you do, mate.
Yeah, I know. Back to the drawing board. So, Mark, thank you. Thank you for 4 great clips that hopefully have set our members up for better decision making and some critical thinking. And thank you to you, our members, for this episode 55 of the Moonshot Master Series. And we started our little journey on this idea of the beginning, the source is finding the most useful information in order to start a critical thinking process in order to make better decisions. And remember that number 2, we're always in jeopardy of the paradox of choice. So try and filter down, limit, reduce the noise. Number 3 was life truly is like Tetris. There are lots of playbooks, lots of ways to reorganize things to avoid making bad decisions and make good decisions. So check out Shane Parrish if you want to do more of that. And more than anything, give yourself time and space to reflect. Ask yourself, which model should I apply to this decision? And you'll not only be kicking ass today, but tomorrow, and you'll be on track to be the best version of yourself. And that's what we're all about here on the Moonshots Master Series. That's a wrap.